Hello everyone, this is Ajamu Jimmy and welcome to Dagon. This is my game for Halloween. I thought I'd record and show. Let me see. Okay, there we go. We're loading up. So I don't know too much about this game aside from, well, I guess I do know a little bit. I think it's just going to be like a walking simulator. You're just going to go through the story of Dagon. Sorry, and for those that don't know, Dagon is a horror story, a cosmic horror story written by H.P Lovecraft. And I have read the story and I quite like it. It's actually, I think, one of my favorite works of H.P. Lovecraft so far. My sister had bought me a collection of some of his works, and so I had started reading through it. And Dagon happened to be the first one, and I've read a couple of them. I even did read The Call of Cthulhu, and Dagon is by far my favorite so far. It's a very short story originally, so I don't know how long this is going to be. And I'm curious to see like what it's going to look like basically. There's not too much gameplay, I think, but I could be wrong about that. But yeah, and this studio, I forget their name, but the makers of this game, basically, when the war in Ukraine broke out, I think they pledged to donate their profits, and I think they've been doing that so far. So it may be a good idea to support this initiative if you're interested in that. But otherwise, let's just get started. Hold on, let me just pause for a minute. Okay, sorry, just had to clear my throat. I don't know why. It's yeah, maybe I'm getting sick. But anyways, let's start up. Dagon is a faithful interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work, focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management here, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along with the plot. Okay, yeah, so walking simulator. But that's okay, that's what we signed up for, so I am aware of that and I am interested in that. So
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
during the game, you will encounter interactive elements. Some of them will allow you to continue your journey. Others reveal interesting facts about the original story, its historical background, and the author. Okay, cool. Some of the trivia is hidden. In order to find these secrets, focus your eyes and look for the Elder sign. So we got this. That's about it. Alright. Oh, you can zoom with this. Ah, ha ha ha. Anything else? The Seeker. We found our first piece of trivia. That's an achievement I just got. Lovecraft's letters. As to letters, my case is peculiar. I write such things exactly as easily and as rapidly as I would utter the same topics in conversation. Indeed, epistolary expression is with me largely replacing conversation. As my condition of nervous prostration becomes more and more acute, I cannot bear to talk much right now, or talk much now, and am becoming as silent as the spectre himself. My loquacity extends itself on paper. H.P. Lovecraft to Reinhard Kleiner, December 23rd, 1917. Okay, so I guess he was not doing too well physically. Throughout his life, Lovecraft penned around 100,000 letters to his friends and fans, out of which about 10% survive to this day, but his tendency to endless correspondence was a relatively late growth. In youth, I scarcely did any letter writing. Thanking anybody for a present was so much of an ordeal that I would rather have written a 250-line pastoral or a 20-page treatise on the rings of Saturn. Selected letters 1929 to 1931, H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft would often skip meals to afford postage. Collections of his correspondence have been published in various books, and selected letters can be found online. Some readers consider them his most important legacy. Interesting. I'm not sure why, and they don't really give any indication as to why some would consider it his most important, but that's fine. You can read the discovered item trivia immediately or go back to them later in the main menu. Turn off displaying trivia if you find that the feature distracts from the story. This can be changed at any time. Okay. I feel like we stick with the stuff. I think that's good. Well, I think there's nothing else for me to do here. So yeah, let's...
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
Mm-hmm.
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
Bro went through something rough. Is there anything else? Let's see this lore. Morphine. Morphine entered into use in the 19th century and was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War and World War I. It was also sold without restrictions until 1914. Well, I can't blame them. How would they know? So, but it is funny to think morphine could just be bought at like a Shoppers Drug Mart or whatever. But anyways, morphine became more popular after the invention of the hypodermic syringe around 1854. Frederick Serturner, who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. Oh, that's interesting. At the time when Dagon was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, already posed a big problem in the United States. That's why, because he's like writing about this story. But there's a twist. It's not the war that's getting to this guy, it's something else entirely. Let's start writing it down, and I guess we'll be retelling.
One of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific, that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
Ah. Any more lore? There's lore there. There's lore everywhere. Wow. Okay, Lovecraft and the Great War. Dagon was written around a month after the United States entered World War I. Lovecraft was actively interested in its course. He composed many poems in which he gave encouragement to soldiers and commented on the events unfolding in Europe. He tried to enlist in the army, which he mentions in one of the letters to Reinhard Kleiner. Some time ago, impressed by my entire uselessness in the world, I resolved to attempt enlistment despite my almost invalid condition. I argued that if I chose a regiment soon to depart for France, my sheer nervous force, which is not inconsiderable, might sustain me till a bullet or piece of shrapnel could more conclusively and effectively dispose of me. Dang. Letters to Reinhard Kleiner. Oh my gosh, okay. I felt that. He felt like so useless. Dang, okay. But even though he passed the physical exam, his mother prevented him from going to the war. Yikes. She has threatened to go to any lengths, legal or otherwise, if I do not reveal all the ills which unfit me for the army. I am Providence. The Life and Times of H.P. Lovecraft. That's pretty funny. Honestly, I also understand that too. My mom would probably do the same. I kind of feel like I will turn off the show trivia upon finding them. Yeah, I feel it is a little distracting, so we will come back to this after. I'll just discover them and then move forward. So we're getting bombarded by the Germans.
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation.
This is so pretty.
So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
Okay, we got some lore there. I guess there's only one piece of lore per thing. That's okay. Man, but this is quite nice. Quite calming and serene. Which is kind of funny because when you think about where we are right now, we just got bombed and captured. Oh, but I think we're escaping.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
No lore here. I'm surprised. Okay. So basically, because we were at the beginning of the war,
When I
things were
finally
easy.
found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings.
Very pretty, though.
Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator.
Feels bad. Not
Of
that
the
I would do any better.
longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
Big yikes, big yikes. So we're lost at sea, basically. Then yeah, the Germans, I guess because the World War was so early, everyone was kind of still following the Geneva Conventions. Although I don't know if the Geneva Conventions were a thing in World War One, but maybe it's better to say they were still being decent. But yeah, as the war stretched on, that stopped being true, I think. But anyways, let's see what's up next.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
That's it. Okay. There's the lore. I spotted it. Any other lore? No. This is nice though. So we're basically adrift, stuck.
But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my
Oh
solitude
no.
upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue.
I mean, that would do it for you.
The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
Mmm. Yummy. Calamari. So this is kind of what I imagined when this happens, but I guess we're gonna get a description and I can talk about that. No more lore, eh? I didn't expect these things to be moving though, but
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished.
I can believe that. Can you imagine just going to sleep and you're surrounded by ocean and then you wake up and you can't even see water?
For there was in the air, and in the rotting soil, a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain.
Ammonites.
Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity.
I can
There was
imagine
nothing
it.
within hearing, and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
This is very cool. Let's see, there's got to be some lore. Lore. That looks like a trilobite almost. Or like a giant something. Yeah, oh, I forgot to mention basically all the texture hearing or all the speaking, the narration, it is word for word from the book. I know that. So. He's so squelchy.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
That's what's unusual. Like, if his theory was true, you would definitely be seeing birds here. So that just lets us know something else is going on, maybe. Ah, wow. Yikes, that's a whole thing. That is a thing moving, because I don't see the rest of the floor moving.
For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue.
Okay, there's my bag that I've packed for myself. No lore, eh? No more lore. I got my eyes peeled for lore. Not seeing any. Okay, let's move on. So we're gonna set out.
On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
Oh, I forgot to mention, one thing about H.P. Lovecraft's writing is he's very vague. And I feel like you have to be with cosmic horror. And that's what I'm curious to see how this is going to turn out, because I think a lot of the fear is in the unknown or the unfathomableness of things. But once you're putting things into image, then it becomes something we can fathom. So let's see what that turns out to be. But I love the way they've done the sky, though. It's nice. It's still so squelchy.
All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
So now we're seeing a lot more foreign things, foreign looking things. Still no lore. Interesting. I have no idea what that is, or what that could be. Trying to see if there's anything moving in the distance. I don't see it. Ah, we got whales. There's got to be something on the whale, no? This might be like crabs then? This looks like crabs. Still nothing. Alright, let's continue on.
That night I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
We got worms. That's what I think these are. Yum. I do believe that the largest organism in existence is a type of worm in the ocean. So maybe this is a reference to that. But I don't believe they get this big, but who's to say they don't? We know very little about the deep sea. More people have been to the moon than have been to the deep sea.
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance, an intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more.
Yeah, we're done.
Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day.
It's much more cool.
Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy.
That is true.
Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset.
Still quite dark though.
Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
Okay, we got some lore.
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined.
See any lore elsewhere? We can't really look anywhere, so.
Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent.
Okay.
Whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual.
Declivity, that's a nice word. This is older English, so some of the words are a little more fancy.
Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon.
An unknown object. Who knows what it could be? I see no more lore, unfortunately, so let's find out. Let's get closer if it's only 100 feet away.
That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature.
Yep.
A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express.
That is either man-made or made by intelligent design. No other lore yet. I guess there would be no reason for there to be lore here.
For despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith.
That's exactly what it is.
Its massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
Did you now? I guess he did. So squelchy.
The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
I see. So there's a little more to this shindig than we originally thought. Alright, let's check it out.
The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world.
I reckon.
Those decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
That Cthulhu.
Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Doré.
Oh, these things down here.
I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men.
Men with tails for legs.
Though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto.
That's probably this place, right?
Or paying homage at some monolithic shrine, which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail.
Well, we see detail right there.
For the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer.
Okay, we got something. These are definitely looking a lot more alien.
Damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background.
You see the whales down there?
For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me.
I wouldn't say these are queer reflections, but okay.
Then, suddenly, I saw it.
Oh.
With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters.
Oof.
Unseemly and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the sloping cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
Bro's tweaking. But we running.
I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing.
He's absolutely lost his mind now. And it's raining. That's interesting. Okay, let's just get on with it.
I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard bells. peals of thunder, and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods.
Thunder and lightning. And goop.
When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital. Brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I
You're
had
super
said
lucky.
much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing. Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
There, we got the lore. I think that's all the lore now. Nope. It is not. Okay, now I think we got all the lore in this area.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
I see. There's got to be some more lore hanging about. Okay, I think that's it. Let's go ahead and see what's going on.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
Necronomicon. That's probably a book that's been banned or something like that. I've heard of a couple books like that. We got another one. More lore. I'm a fiend for the lore. I think there's no more lore. I think that's it. Let's go on. So, bro is a square. We're moving on. That's what I gather. Okay, let's leave.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing.
In your
I
dreams?
tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave.
Dang.
So now, I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
Alright. It's over. Time to die.
Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm,
It could have been.
a mere freak of fever, as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open
Heat stroke
boat
is a real thing.
after my escape from the German man of war.
Yeah, and you definitely had a traumatic experience there.
This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed.
That's
Worshipping
facts.
their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
Okay. Bro has definitely been called by Cthulhu, I think. Definitely not in his right mind right now. Any lore? No lore? Okay, fine.
The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
He's coming for me. There's got to be some more lore here. I guess not. No more lore. Alright, let's see what fate has in store for me.
It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
Alright, to the window, to the floor. And now I am no more. There we go. And that's it. Alright, let's exit. We could check out the lore if you want, but maybe I will, just because it's interesting. But honestly, I was hoping for not like a word by word retelling.
And scary stories have been accompanying men for centuries. They have many faces and forms. But what is their purpose? Why do we enjoy being afraid so much?
I personally
During
don't
our
enjoy it.
I'll try to...
All the colors of dread. Right? Okay. So let's see. We got everything. No, we missed one. How do we miss one? Ugh. Feels bad. Okay. So let's go check this out. But yeah, as a little review, I guess. Not my cup of tea. I'll say that. You know? I like reading the books, but the problem with cosmic horror is it's very hard to do anything visual with it because a big part of the fear associated with it is the unknown. And once you put an image to something, if it's something we recognize, then, you know, it's not so scary anymore. I mean, even if it was something wacky, just the fact that you're seeing it, it's hard to convey fear like that. But anyways, let's see. We got morphine. We got this. We got the Huns. This is new. The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as brutal, deadly warriors and masters of quick raids who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for Germans in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave a speech to his troops on the 27th of July in 1900 before they embarked to China. Should you encounter the enemy, he will be defeated. No quarter will be given. Prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is forfeited. Just as 1,000 years ago, the Huns under the King Attila made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. The refusal to take prisoners was a clear breach of the laws and customs of war adopted during the First Hague Convention of 1899. That is pretty savage. The Return to Short Stories. Dagon was written in July 1917 and first published in 1919 in The Vagrant, an amateur magazine focused on the supernatural. The story is the first of his stories that introduced an element from the Cthulhu mythos, Dagon itself. A pagan cult worshipping Dagon later appears in The Shadow over Innsmouth, one of Lovecraft's most popular works. I haven't gotten to that story yet, but I will one day. 1917 is also the year when he wrote The Tomb, a story about Jervis Dudley, a daydreamer who discovers a mysterious mausoleum in the woods by his house and becomes obsessed with it. These two works marked Lovecraft's return to short story writing after he burned most of his attempts at the genre 9 years prior and decided to concentrate on poetry. Interesting. Lovecraft stated that it was his friend, William Paul Cook, a literary publisher and critic, who convinced him to start writing weird fiction again. Cool. Let's see, the origins of Dagon. Dagon seems to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel by Irvin S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between a hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake. Supernatural horror in literature, H.P. Lovecraft. That's a reference to that, I guess, or the citation. And Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in the ooze that covered its surface. That's a pretty cool concept. That's something I do enjoy about reading the book. In visualizing it and playing through it, I didn't really get that same sense that I had in my mind when I was reading it, but like I said, it's hard to translate that. I dreamed that the whole hideous crawl and can yet feel the ooze sucking me down. In defense of Dagon. Okay. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and sea smells. Oh, that's like me. I actually don't eat fish if I can help it. I mean, of course, I'll eat to survive, and if it would be perceived as disrespectful to not eat it, I'd eat it. But yeah, I don't like fish, and I don't like the smell of fish. The fishiness bothers me. In his own words, I have hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old, but I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. The Dweller in Darkness, Lovecraft, 1927, by Donald Wandre. Yeah, I'm not afraid of fish, nor am I afraid of the sea, but I'm actually fascinated by the sea, and I really do love learning about it, and especially the deep sea and the mystery around it. But seafood, I don't eat. Let's see. The mystery of volcanic islands. Volcanic eruptions sometimes result in the creation of islands. Most of them are transient and erode after some time, but some prove permanent. The floating pumice, porous rock created when superheated, pressurized rock is ejected from a volcano, can move across long distances and transport barnacles and microalgae that cling to it. In 2001, rafts of pumice created during the eruption of a volcano near Tonga, Polynesia, eventually reached Australia. That's pretty cool. Very cool tidbit. The horrors of the ocean. The creator of the Cthulhu mythos and the fictional underwater city of R'lyeh was convinced that life could not exist at the bottom of the ocean because the water pressure would make it uninhabitable. Today we know that the darkest depths of the ocean are home to many peculiar organisms. The deepest dwelling fish we have discovered so far, the Mariana snailfish, can live about 8,000 meters, more than 26,000 feet, below the ocean's surface, in never-ending darkness and at hellishly crushing pressures, hundreds of times stronger than those found at sea level. Upon glancing at the modern photos of deep-sea creatures, such as the anglerfish, the fangtooth, or the viperfish, and their truly Lovecraftian characteristics, it's hard not to find some irony in this. Yeah, it's very true. If you look up creatures of the deep, man, like, their unusualness and uniqueness is what kind of fascinates me with them. Like, there's really nothing like it. It's like, yeah, if you tell a kid to draw a monster, the things the children will draw, like, you can see elements of that in these real life organisms. It's very cool. Okay, then we have the loner. Contrary to popular opinion, Lovecraft was not an ever-frowning, eccentric, grumpy loner. He considered himself to be a person who appreciated humor. Moreover, he would often meet with friends in his apartment or at various cafes in Brooklyn and Manhattan. At times, his social life was so intensive, his work would suffer for months. There was a point when he finally decided he needed to put an end to daily meetings and loitering in New York cafeterias and resorted to hiding at home and reading with the main room light turned off, pretending he wasn't there whenever a friend knocked on his door. He also had another method of deterring his guests, which involved greeting them in a bathrobe, with an unmade bed visible in the background and piles of paper scattered across the floor. Bro, just tell the boys that you can't meet them for another month or so, you know? There was a period I was working 2 full-time jobs, and before I started that chapter of my life, I told my buddies, I'm like, you're not going to see me for X amount of time. So, you know, don't be calling me for doing stuff. And they were fine. And then when it was over, then we did stuff. But he definitely went to extremes. Storytelling methods. Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings at the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journals and characters' notes, The Shadow Out of Time, The Haunt of the Dark, islands emerging from the ocean, The Call of Cthulhu, that one I have read, or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies, Migo in the Dark, Migo in the Whisper in Darkness. Okay, that one I also haven't read. It's also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also conclude in a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending. I see. Yeah, so people that deal with cosmic forces tend to die. That's just that's how it is. The Piltdown Man. Lovecraft would often use the latest scientific discoveries as inspiration for his works. He would even update his stories at the last moment in order to make sure they reflected the latest breakthroughs. Unfortunately, yeah, this method was not without his flaws. After Lovecraft's death, the Piltdown Man discovery mentioned in Dagon turned out to be a paleoanthropological fraud. Yeah, it was. But that's okay because the idea of it was real, I guess, but that particular instance happened to be fraud or false. In 1912, Charles Darwin, an amateur archaeologist, announced that he had discovered the missing link between ape and man, the fossilized remains of a previously unknown early human. Years later, they turned out to be a forgery, but by that point, the fraud had already managed to negatively affect the early research on human evolution. In the year when the discovery took place, the majority of the scientific community believed Dawson indeed found the missing link. Charles Dawson, not Charles Darwin, sorry. In 1953, Time magazine published evidence proving that Dawson was a con man. It turned out that the fossils of the previously unknown early human consisted of a human skull, the jaw of an orangutan, and chimpanzee teeth. Yeah, I remember learning about that in school. The journalist. Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literature and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticisms to heart, which resulted in his decision to step away from writing poetry and concentrate on weird fiction again. For the first time since his teenage years, Dagon, published in 1919, is one of the short stories written during that period. In this example excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude towards warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments and at the proper time take advantage of their more altruistic and less astute contemporaries in a wild career of conquest against unarmed victims. No country is, or ever can be, above warfare, until the basic impulses of the human animal shall have miraculously changed. Interesting. Okay, let's move on. That is true. I do believe that. It's kind of like you can only trust everyone if everyone has like a the potential to defend themselves, I guess. But even then, that kind of makes it hard. But anyways. Next we have the atheist. Lovecraft considered himself an atheist and absolute materialist, which he attributed partly to his early childhood interest in astronomy and science in general. In his own words, I am, indeed, an absolute materialist so far as actual belief goes, with not a shred of credence in any form of supernaturalism, religion, spiritualism, transcendentalism, metapsychosis, or immortality. All I say is that I think it is damn unlikely that anything like a central cosmic will, a spirit world, or an eternal survival of personality exist. They are the most preposterous and unjustified of all the guesses which can be made about the universe, and I am not enough of a hair-splitter to pretend that I don't regard them as errant and negligible moonshine. In theory, I am an agnostic, but pending the appearance of radical evidence, I must be classed practically and provisionally as an atheist. Okay, interesting. See, here's the thing. The difference between atheism and agnosticism is that if you're agnostic, you are open to the possibility that evidence of a god can exist, or some sort of supernatural being, and you would, believe, provided that there's sufficient evidence. Whereas an atheist is like, even if there was evidence on principle or on theory, I think there's no way that you can justify or agree that there could be some sort of higher being. So, to me, atheism seems a little impractical. I think if you're going that way, agnosticism is probably ideal, because you should be open, especially if you're someone of science, you should be open to the idea that new evidence can shift the paradigm of your worldview. But that's just my little 2 cents. In defense of Dagon. In 1921, Lovecraft released a series of 3 essays. Okay. The Defense Reopens, The Defense Remains Open, and Final Words, which later published as a collection titled In Defense of Dagon, in which he rebuked a series of criticisms directed at his works. Some notable quotes: I paint what I dream and will let the public settle the rest amongst themselves. Mr. Monday asks the raison d'etre of Dagon. I will give it. Like, I think that's, why does it, the reason for existence? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I will give it purely and simply to reproduce a mood. Its object is the simplest in all art, betrayal. And I kind of do agree with that. It's like, it's a vibe, Dagon, like, maybe it's not the most fancy story he's written, and it's maybe not the most concise story written, period. It's very vague, but it's just an idea, it's just a feeling, and I really do get that when I read it, so that's one of the reasons why I like it so much. Next he says, the physical horrors of war, no matter how extreme and unprecedented, hardly have a bearing on the entirely different realm of supernatural terror. Ghosts are still ghosts. The mind can get more thrills from unrealities than from realities. And that is true, and I think that's the crux of cosmic horror, right? That he wants something that we can't understand, because the things we don't understand about life and existence are far more terrifying than the things that we can fathom. Okay, let's see, Dagon itself. Dagon, pronounced Dagon maybe? I don't know. Was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The ruler of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in an Assyrian poem and an underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's work, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that reside in the ocean. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. Okay, and then let's see. August Derleth and the Cthulhu Mythos. August Derleth was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works throughout his company, Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's work, after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derleth was a devout Catholic to the Cthulhu mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misinterpreted in today's culture. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu mythos was coined by Derleth after the author left the mortal plane. But I think that's true. Like, in the stories that I've read by H.P. Lovecraft, it's like these things are bad in the sense that they tend to get the people killed, but it's more like these things just are going on and happening without our understanding and knowledge of why and what's going on. And I think, morality. I mean, I wouldn't say that's true. There was just one story that I read where I forget the name of it, but it was like there's this mountain where if you go on the mountain, there's this thing, this entity, this unknown force that will come and kill you, and there's records of like groups of people and even towns have been like devastated by this thing, and when you go there, all you see is like scattered bodies and blood, and like not even bodies, you see pieces of bodies and blood and everything. And late at the very end of the book, it's revealed that it's actually a horde of inbred people that are like cannibals that's doing this. So I don't know, that seems like kind of evil, but maybe Derleth had some play in kind of reshaping that story to make it have a good versus evil kind of vibe. Anyways, The Marketer. Let me know if you know what story I'm referring to in the comments. There was another one where there was this famous painter, and people were so impressed with the things that he could come up with. And I think he paints like grotesque things or unusual things or creatures of the imagination. And then at the very end, man, the twist there is that the guy was painting from a picture. He had a real picture. So whatever, all the stuff he was making was real stuff he had seen. But I guess that's also actually more ambiguous as well. That's just like there, he just saw it and he's benefiting from it. But yeah, so maybe the comment about the guy injecting morality kind of still stands. But anyways, Lovecraft's attempts to find a job in 1925 were influenced by advice he received from friends. Among others, he started freelancing for a marketing magazine where he would write announcements and commercials. Feel free to judge his copywriting skills for yourself. From an ad for Curtis Woodwork. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the usual structure units and the cleverest contrivances of built-in or permanent furniture, such as bookcases, dressers, buffets, and cupboards. Every model is conceived and created with the purest art, ripest scholarship, and mellowest craftsmanship which energetic enterprise can command, and made to conform rigidly to the architecture of each particular type of home. The cost, consideration, and quality is amazingly low. What? Oh, the cost considering the quality. Okay. And a trademark on the individual pieces prevents any substitution by careless contractors. Oh, okay. I think the modern term for this is glazing. I don't know. Okay, the scientists. These days, the word scientist is a widely accepted term, but at the time Dagon was published, it was subject to a wide debate. After the author used it in the story, critics pointed out that man of science was a more appropriate term of employ. He admitted, in defense of Dagon, that if Dagon were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the phrase they suggested. Scientist was coined as an analog to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet, in the 19th and early 20th century, scientific researchers in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that man of science, resembling the term man of letters, was the only proper choice. Among other things, it was gender-specific, indicating that science was an endeavor to be pursued by only one sex. The term scientist became more accepted only after World War II, and man of science started fading into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym. That's interesting. I did not know that. And the last one that we have unlocked is Lovecraft on tobacco and alcoholism. Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12, in order to look and feel like an adult. In his correspondence with friend Reinhard Kleiner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced by his letter to Zelia Brown, dated the 13th of February 1928. As for the matter of drinking, I have never tasted intoxicating liquor and never intend to, having a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which blunts or coarsens the delicate natural equipoise of the evolved human intellect and imagination. Drinking excited my personal repugnance. Hence, I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. I am rather in favor of prohibition, the prohibition of any one antisocial force as well as of any other. So, I also don't drink, but I do not share his belief that prohibition is the way to go. I think it's not great, but and I actually don't drink for the same reason that he has here, where I don't like the idea of taking mind-altering things. There are certain exceptions, of course, like, when I take a Tylenol, I do understand that's changing some element of the way that my brain works for a temporary period, just like how alcohol does. But yeah, I guess alcohol has some more long-term effects, and also it's not necessary. If I'm taking Tylenol, it's because I've got an issue that I got to deal with, which some could argue sometimes you need alcohol to help deal with an issue, and sometimes smoking even helps with dealing issues. But I don't know, that for those reasons, because it's a not cut and dry thing. That's why I wouldn't really say everybody should stop drinking. It's just for me, I wouldn't drink. But anyways, I think that's pretty much it. I don't know what that last one is. Let me know if it is interesting or what it is, and we can talk about that in the comments. But that's pretty much the game. So I'm glad I did it, but yeah, I think I'm not going to be buying the DLCs. I think that's it for me. But anyways, have a nice day, everyone. Happy Halloween.